Caveat emptor, Latin for let the buyer beware, a doctrine that places on buyers the burden to reasonably examine property before purchase and take responsibility for its condition. Should you be concerned? Well, if you're buying real property in Alabama, you'd better be. Why? Because caveat emptor is the law in Alabama. If you're buying in Florida, Georgia, Tennessee, or Mississippi, any of the states that's surrounding Alabama, not so much. Because in those states that are not caveat emptor states, their judicial system places responsibilities on the seller to disclose defects and to pass on knowledge they would have about the home that they're selling. These seller disclosures are typically performed on a 2 or 3 page document which the seller answers questions about everything dealing with the property. And if you're relocating to Alabama from a not caveat emptor state, you're used to being able to rely on these legal documents and disclosures. But not in Alabama. Caveat emptor, buyer beware, is the law in Alabama. This means that the seller in Alabama has no affirmative duty to disclose material defect in the home unless the defect was known and could, under federal law, adversely affect the health or safety of the buyer. Affirmative duty means voluntary disclosure without being asked. Material defect is best defined as what would be a significant factor in a buyer's decision to buy or not buy a particular house. And oh yeah, health or safety disclosure requirements are more narrowly defined under federal law than the average consumer would think. And to make matters worse, Alabama case law has held for the seller citing caveat emptor when instances when the seller lied to the buyer in response to direct questions. Caveat emptor definitely stacks the cards against the buyer. The burden is on the buyer to examine the property and take responsibility for the condition. If it took Alabama 85 years to finally allow buyers to have representation, it shouldn't be a surprise to you to learn that Alabama does not require sellers to disclose the condition of their homes. Under the cloud of buyer beware, buyers have the obligation to inspect and investigate the homes they are buying without the benefit of sellers' input. Before the 1970s, real estate was a local business. There were no national franchises. As the national franchises expanded, they began to standardize their procedures and practices across all states. In almost all states, there is a state law requiring disclosure by the seller of known defects, and that disclosure is backed by legal penalties if a problem exists that was not disclosed. We see seller disclosure forms in Alabama today on many homes offered by sale, especially by the franchises, and they make everybody feel really good, but they aren't worth the paper they're printed on. The problem is they're not enforceable. Alabama's Supreme Court has ruled there is no recourse against a seller who lies on a seller's disclosure because the underlying law says buyer beware. Now, on a side note, if you as a seller are asked to sign a seller's disclosure, you don't have to. If you don't want to sign, write on the disclosure, I don't want to sign, and give it back to the listing agent. He can't require your signature under Alabama law. Also note that real estate licensees are required by law to answer truthfully. So ask the listing agent directly and in writing with written response requested if you have concerns. They may answer that they don't know, but they're liable if they lie, unlike the seller. Caveat emptor is serious, but it has a simple remedy. The buyer simply must have the property thoroughly inspected. The buyer must take nothing for granted. Never waive your inspection rights. All areas of concern must be inspected. If the normal home inspection reveals concerns that are beyond the scope of the inspection, such as plumbing, electrical, air conditioning, structural, or mold, it is the responsibility of the buyer to retain professionals to investigate And for goodness sake, get the separate termite, septic tank, and well water quality inspections. When inspections are done and the buyer closes on the sale and then a defect rears its head, the buyer has a legal recourse. The buyer won't sue the seller unless the seller intentionally concealed pertinent information about the property that could affect one's health or safety. The buyer would sue the inspector. Such suits where inspections have been done, Alabama Supreme Court has generally ruled in favor of the buyer. The difficulty is that the inspector's contract frequently limits the level of liability. For example, $2,500 in the most recent contract I looked at. Thank you for watching this video. If you learned something new, please hit the like button. Please comment below to share your thoughts and experiences with others. And subscribe to my channel if you want to know more about what's happening in real estate in Baldwin County. I'm Tom Ball, a local realtor in Baldwin County. Reach out to me if you have any questions on Caveat Emptor or anything else. Thank you.